Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Again, my name is Rachel Essig. I'm the Executive Director here at Riverview Cemetery in Portland, Oregon. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn about natural burial and aqua cremation and a new development that we are working on within our cemetery. I'd first off like to thank Holly Pruett. She is on the webinar. Holly is a life cycle celebrant and who has been a consultant to Riverview and helped shape and form our natural burial program through the years. Holly is joining us to help provide some technical support to us today. And then also we have Anna Mehrer, who is our social media maven for Riverview. She also helps us with graphic design and print materials. She's basically running the show. So she's in charge of the attendees and running the slideshow, etc. I thought we would start off with a little icebreaker to center ourselves around what we're going to be talking about today. And we have a short 3-question poll. Feel free to click through the answers. You'll see the results. Let's get the poll started, a little icebreaker, get to know each other. Okay, so we've got about 71% of you that have been to Riverview. That's so awesome. And about 30% that haven't. And good thing that there's been a few that, or none, that are not sure if they've been here or not. The next questions will come up in just a few minutes. This will be an interesting one to see what you all have thought about what'll be done with your body. Okay, a good portion of you are interested in green burial, 1 person in conventional, nobody interested in flame cremation, 5 of you interested in water cremation. Some folks are thinking about doing something different, and about 6 of you are unsure of what you'd like to have done. We'll have 1 more question and then we'll get the show started. Okay, so as far as pre-arrangements, about 20% of you have already some form of pre-arrangements. 73% haven't. That's okay. I've not made mine either. Don't worry. And then about 8% of you have partial arrangements. So Anna, if you'd click the next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to go over the agenda for today. So I'm Rachel Essig, the Executive Director at Riverview Cemetery, and I will kick it off with Marcus Terry, who's joining us. He's the Managing Director of Riverview Cemetery Funeral Home, and together we're going to be talking about natural burial and aqua cremation. And then we'll hand it over to Mary with West Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. Mary will be talking about the environmental value of Riverview. And then we'll be followed up with Chelsea McCann of Walker Macy. She's a landscape architect, and she'll be giving an outline of the natural burial meadow at Riverview. And then we've set aside quite a bit of time at the end, about 20 minutes for questions and answers. You can type your questions in the chat. Holly will be cataloging those to make sure we go back and answer them. And if we even have more time, people are more than welcome to turn their cameras on and linger so we can all chat together. So Anna, if you go to the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about Riverview. I'm just going to move the lovely faces of our panelists out of the way so I can read. So Riverview was founded in 1882. It's a nonprofit membership association. We are the oldest endowment care cemetery in Portland, 167 acres, 25 of which is undeveloped. We have an all volunteer board of trustees. In the spring of 2004, we added a for-profit funeral home, and the profits go back to the cemetery. The cemetery is the sole owner of the funeral home, and it's a way to keep this vibrant cemetery alive and going. In the fall of 2009, my predecessor, who's pictured to the right of me, is David Noble. And David Noble brought natural burial to Riverview, ensured that we were certified by the Green Burial Council as a hybrid cemetery. And in the spring of 2018, the year that he retired, he brought Aqua Cremation to Riverview. And then I got the torch passed to me. So, and the reason why we're here today is to talk about the natural burial section at Riverview. And hopefully that'll be dedicated and opened in 2022. We've started work already this year in 2021 with phase 1. And then in the future, we will open up a forested natural burial area in the 25 undeveloped acres. Anna, would you advance to the next slide? Thank you. So what is natural burial? The Green Burial Council definition of natural burial is green or natural burial is a way of caring for the dead with minimal environmental impact that aids in the conservation of natural resources, reduction of carbon emissions, protection of worker health, and the restoration or preservation of habitat. Green burial necessitates the use of non-toxic and biodegradable materials, such as caskets, shrouds, and urns.
So I'm going to speak to you about Riverview's green funerals. The burial container can be a wide range of offerings. It could be willow, bamboo, seagrass, or all natural wood. And all of these items are usually made without metal hinges, handles, or latches, and have a natural pillow or natural interior. So that way they are fully biodegradable. You can also have, as pictured in the bottom, a lowering board, and as pictured up top, a shroud. The preservation prior to the actual burial can be refrigeration, dry ice, or there's formaldehyde-free embalming fluid that we could use as well. You can still have a traditional service in a chapel. When you're having a green service, you can also have green memorial folders, so they're out of recycled paper. And then also you can carry that through to your reception and have organic and natural foods, fair trade coffee, and napkins and other materials be recycled as well. And then at the graveside, the lowering is more natural. You have less of the sounds that we typically hear on a traditional burial. And then the closing of the grave is more natural as well, and usually starts with some shovels and instead of the backhoe immediately.
Great. Thanks, Marcus. So you might be wondering, how does it work? So there's basically 3 requirements: contact with the elements, no preservatives, and biodegradable. So contact with the elements means soil, water, microbes, air, all in the right balance. So if there's too much water, it's anaerobic. If it's too much air, we have desiccation. If it's too many microbes, well, that's kind of silly because there's never too many microbes when it comes to decomposition. So we want that. There's no or minimal preservatives because it kills the microbes. And then biodegradable packaging, if you will, such as a shroud or natural material casket. And these help feed the microbes and minimize cemetery maintenance. Thanks, Anna. So then you might be wondering, and I get this question all the time, how is the grave prepared? So it's 4 feet deep, a natural liner, straw, compost, and backfill. So here at Riverview, we dig our natural burial graves 4 feet deep, just slightly longer and wider than the casket or lowering board. During the wet season, we do line the graves with a pine 1-inch by 12-inch boards to prevent cave-ins prior to burial. Straw is placed at the bottom of the grave and also over the remains or when a casket's not being used. A layer of compost material is placed around and over the casket or straw over a shrouded remains. And then we backfill as usual and replace the sod. So I'm going to talk a little bit about aqua cremation, which is also known as alkaline hydrolysis. So as you can see on the screen, sorry about that. As you can see on the screen, it's a gentle and respectful process. There's no emissions of harmful greenhouse gases or mercury. Over 90% energy savings when compared to flame-based cremation, and 1/10 of the carbon footprint of flame-based cremation. And you receive 20% more remains. I'll go on a little bit more to describe the process of alkaline hydrolysis. It's actually been, can you go back, Anna? Sorry. So alkaline hydrolysis has been around for quite a long time. And it's basically when an individual body is gently placed in a container that is then placed in a clean stainless steel vessel. A combination of water flow, temperature, and alkalinity are used to accelerate the natural process of tissue hydrolysis. At the end of the process, the body has been returned to its natural form, dissolved in the water. The only solid remains left are mineral bones. The water-based process is 95% water and 5% alkali. A combination of alkalis is sodium and potassium hydroxide are used to dissolve the body tissue. These alkalis are the same alkalis used in common cosmetic products and even in food preparation. At the end of the process, the chemical has been completely used and no longer remains in the water solution. So you might wonder what happens to the water. As with embalming, the water is returned to the normal wastewater treatment system. The alkaline process produces a completely sterile solution of amino acids, sugars, nutrients, salts, and soap. And these are the byproducts of natural decomposition. Okay, Anna, let's talk about flame cremation. So flame cremation was originally seen as greener. However, it does burn fossil fuels. There are mercury emissions, which results in pollution and wasted energy. Approximately 2,000 cubic feet of natural gas is used per cremation, heated up to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. That's enough fuel used. You could take a 500-mile road trip with as much fuel as that represents. And it burns 4 kilowatt hours of electricity. Next slide, please, Anna. I wanted you to see what the alkaline hydrolysis machine looks like. The person inside the machine to the right is Dion Stromer, and Dion brought alkaline hydrolysis to the Portland area in 2018. He's quite a character. And basically, I have to give all credit to what I just said about alkaline hydrolysis to Dion, because he has a really good way to explain it. But that's what it looks like. It's just a stainless steel vessel, and the water and the alkalis get mixed in. It's about a 4-hour process altogether. Next slide, Anna.
So as you can see, the photo to your left is your traditional flame crematory machine after the cremation has been completed. And then to your right is the alkaline hydrolysis at its finish point. The alkaline hydrolysis machine, when you start it, you set it and you don't reopen it. The flame, there is more movement, as well as you always need a rigid container in the standard cremation machine. So therefore, there's a little bit more particulate that is done at the end versus the alkaline hydrolysis machine. You go in either completely naked or wrapped in a silk shroud. So that way it just naturally dissolves and allows what you see on the right, where it's just the bone left over on the metal tray. Next slide. What you see on the left is, again, your standard flame cremation cremated remains. And then on the right is cremated remains from alkaline hydrolysis. The white color, because you're not using flame and you're using water and alkali, it comes out a lot cleaner. So therefore, when you warm up the bones to allow them to take out all the excess moisture and then process, they typically look more white powder substance versus your standard cremation and cremated remains that have more bone particulate and have more of that ashy gray tone to them.
Thank you, Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to end talking about cremation, around cremation memorialization and scattering. This year we had our first scatter day, and we offer free scattering once a year. This year was our first, and that's really for people that thought they were going to scatter for whatever reason, couldn't bring themselves to do it, or there's always some family member that winds up with other family members' urns, and then they don't know what to do with the cremated remains. So we started offering this free service once a year. An authorization needs to be signed with us, and we will catalog the decedent's name in our records so future generations can discover where they're at. But also, a lot of people don't realize with cremation, you can treat it just like a full body burial and have a memorial. And that's what you see on the trail to the left. And that's one of our new cremation developments at Riverview. So you could have a traditional memorial. Your name could just go on a cenotaph, which is just a stone tablet. And that would be the memorialization, or some people just choose to have the name recorded in our records, and that's the only record of the death. So Anna, let's hand it over to Mary. I'll introduce her really quick. So Mary with the West Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District will be talking to us a bit about the environmental value of Riverview.
Good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here to share about the gem of a natural area that Riverview has. You were just hearing a little bit about the significant acreage. We've got a map here showing the forested corridors and all the units we've broken down to show different management and steps in restoring these areas. We've been very happy to be partnering with Riverview since 2012 in helping enhance the already really important functions that these natural areas are providing. So in this area, we're in the Stevens Creek watershed and the larger subwatershed of Riverview, which actually is one of the most intact subwatersheds in the city of Portland that provides a host of wildlife habitat, including critically important cool water refugia for threatened and endangered salmonids. When you get to the Willamette system specifically, that's a limiting factor for them making it through and rearing their young in this little area. So incredibly important area that has also been protected and restored outside of Riverview's boundaries, both Lewis and Clark, and of course the newly acquired city of Portland natural areas really significantly enhance what type of wildlife can use this area. And as you look across the West Hills, we also have a really important forest connectivity stretch that Riverview provides for a host of, again, everything from birds to small mammals that are trying to cross the path between Tryon Creek State Natural Area as well as Forest Park City Park, which is the largest city park in the nation. So a really significant area that eventually connects some wildlife all the way to the coastal range. Really special also to think about all the different riparian areas, so the streams flowing through these areas, which in total through Riverview includes 2.2 miles, which is quite significant for all the different creatures that depend on that area, as well as the clean water we need to be entering the Willamette as you move on through. You know, a variety of special habitats, 5 named special habitats are included in this area. So we're so happy that Riverview has been thoughtfully trying to manage these areas. And I say trying in that we understand there's a lot of challenges to managing any area in the city of Portland. One of the biggest threats we've noticed is invasive species in this area as we develop plans with Riverview to enhance or restore these areas. We continue to want to stand by and be a partner in this work. We've worked and matched funding of just under $17,000 between West Multnomah's money and state money in addressing these invasives, and hope to continue the partnership. And also just wanted to mention, we're very excited about the community engagement that Riverview is looking at and helping connect people with these natural areas and better understand how you know, their actions might impact these areas, and even maybe engage folks in the actual long-term maintenance of these areas, which is what it takes to kind of continue to protect the investments we've made so far. I think that's about it from me.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah,
that was great. Thank you. So up next, I'd like to introduce Chelsea McCann of Walker Macy. They are a landscape architect firm here in Portland. Chelsea, as you can see, she's committed to advancing large-scale projects that offer transformative public benefit and for fostering creativity in the firm's design work and culture. So I'm going to hand it over to Chelsea. She talks about our new section.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So I get the pleasure of going through and revealing the concept design for the burial area and the natural burial So what you see right now on the screen is the location of the site. It is toward the southeast portion of Riverview. Mary was just talking about those stream alignments, and the site itself actually is bounded on its north side by one of those stream zones and associated kind of buffer. So there's this wonderful sort of natural northern edge to it with a lot of trees that start to extend up onto the site itself, which makes it a really beautiful location. The site just in general slopes from the south edge, where you can see the road in this, and it slopes to the north toward that stream, more or less. So generally that's how it works. So if we go to the next slide. We zoom in a little bit, you can see this was the bigger area that Walker Macy, our design team, we have other consultants as well who were brought in to really focus in on developing a concept for this. I think Rachel alluded to earlier that this natural burial area has been in the thought process for quite some time. So we were really excited to be brought in to actually advance the idea and start to make it real so that we can get it built. So the entire area that we're looking at is this whole zone, but we're really going to focus on the natural burial area, which is to the north. The southern portion, we're working on some design work for that. If you are out at the cemetery, you would see it's already fairly smooth and has lawn in it. And that area is going to be more of a conventional burial area approach. And then the north will be the natural. So if we move forward. So when we started this project, we first wanted to think about what, this was a blank slate other than, some beautiful trees, beautiful landscape, but what did we want it to be and what would make sense for Riverview? So we stepped back a little bit and thought about this expansion area in the context of the cemetery and in the context of the city and the state of Oregon. So first, for those who have been to Riverview, it is a beautiful cemetery and it has been around for quite some time, has many historic names, historic families. It's a very rich place. And the character of the cemetery itself is a very park-like setting. It has rolling hills, lots of big, beautiful canopy trees. If you spend a little time on Google, you will find all kinds of photos that people have taken just exploring the cemetery more as a park. So it's a really beautiful place and very special within the city. We thought it was important as we developed this natural burial area to make sure that it felt like it fit within the context of those characteristics of the cemetery, but also that this should feel like it's from the Pacific Northwest. We didn't want to create a burial area that could be found anywhere. So we wanted to draw from the natural beauty of our community and our surroundings, including taking advantage of some of those existing trees on the site, most of which are natives, as well as incorporating just beautiful meadow feel and a lot of stonework, the beautiful granite and basalt stonework on the cemetery already. We want to pull that into this site. So these are images that you see that were part of an inspiration board. The left-hand side are images from the cemetery, sort of existing feel of the cemetery. And then on the right are other sorts of images that we were inspired by, that we thought were beautiful and felt appropriate for a place to start in terms of visioning. So if we move to the next slide. This is the plan of the cemetery itself, and I apologize, it's a little light, but you can see the southern portion is that conventional burial area, and we have a lot of access points that are coming straight in, but that northern portion, as we sort of move down the hill, there's an access route that's really for maintenance. It's a temporary access that will kind of separates that conventional burial from the northern. In the northern area, we are working on some winding paths that come in and sort of drop along some of the slope that's in here. It is a very kind of slope and rolling site. that drop in and weave through a lot of those trees. We are trying to preserve a majority of the existing trees on site because we think they give it some beautiful character. And then we're working to carve in some rolling topography around and through the tree zones, so it will feel somewhat natural and a little less formal than some of the other portions of the cemetery. The pathways themselves, we're imagining, will be mostly gravel. There are some areas where we have some steps which are necessary to preserve the trees and help people move through the site given the steep slopes. And then we do have an area that's marked as the Meadowview Terrace. That's a larger flat area that we're carving out with a little bit of an overlook that looks toward the east, toward the river and some of the trees along that edge. And along the edge of that is a retaining wall that will help kind of mark the southern edge of that overlook. I have a perspective of it just a minute, so it'll make a little more sense. And so it allows us to also incorporate, while there will be plenty of zones for in-ground burial, there will also be opportunities for columbaria or markers, potentially markers for those whose cremains have been scattered elsewhere. So if we move forward one more. So this is my last image right now, and I'm sure you all have questions, but this is a perspective showing the concept for that overlook that you saw on the site and where some of those columbaria walls are. But the idea here is to create a contemplative place where folks can gather, enjoy the views, but of course you can also walk into the burial areas. From a landscape standpoint, we are envisioning that in this area, it won't be quite as tightly manicured as a lawn as some of the other areas on the site. We are talking to Rachel and her team about encouraging a little bit of wildflower in the mix throughout the burial area. So it'll have a little bit of a softer feel. And then we do, as I said, we have these stands of trees that are coming through. We are going to plant some more and then some understory plants with a focus toward natives, especially since we're so close to the stream. We want to make sure that, you know, we're encouraging kind of that sort of natural and native connection from the stream area up and letting it sort of extend up a little bit into the burial area to have it sort of feel like one space. So I think that's what I have, Rachel, unless you have other things you'd like me to touch on.
Actually, Anna, if you'd go back, yeah, right there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the north and the south ends of this development. So I wanted to clarify that the conventional burial part of this development is actually conventional and natural burial. We allow natural burial throughout Riverview. There's only a few sections where we don't allow it, and that's because those sections are full. Otherwise, anywhere in Riverview, you could have a natural burial. Let's say your husband wants to be in a metal casket and in a vault. He can do that in this conventional burial side, but let's say you want a natural burial and you want to be laid next to him. You could have a natural burial next to your spouse and you both can choose whichever way you want to go. So that is an option. Now the meadow, the northern part, the natural burial area, that's exclusively natural burial. So that's for folks that really feel hard and true to environmentally friendly practices throughout their life and even in death. So we're at the end and we're ready for questions. So I would suggest for questions, you use the chat feature to enter them. I know that there's already been some questions asked, and I would need to find them. So give me a moment.
Rachel, Greg has a question about markers being used in natural burial. And if there weren't a marker, how would your loved ones find someone buried without a marker?
Correct. That's a really good question, Greg. Obviously right now, as it stands, anywhere in Riverview, you can have a marker that marks your grave. And we, just like anything else we do, we offer a wide variety of options for a marker. For people who choose not to have a marker, and I mean, this is a kind of an important thing to know, is not everybody chooses to have memorialization. There's some people that choose not to have their name on the ground. However, we know where everybody is because of our records. So cemeteries, you need to look at them like neighborhoods. So they have a numbering system, just like your house number has on it. And then inside your house, there's residents. It's the same idea for a cemetery. So we would be able to locate a decedent and help you find them. Now, in the natural burial section, the meadow that we're developing, we will have memorialization, but it will be very, very light touch. Maybe some natural looking boulders or a common memorialization. So maybe a granite or a basalt column where names are inscribed in the order of the general area of where people will be buried. The layout of the natural burial section is a little bit different than most cemeteries. It is on a grid, but because of the way the land is, there might be some areas that'll have just 4 graves, while other areas might have 20 graves. So depending on where we're at in the natural burial section, there'll be different types of memorialization. So Holly, I'm going to need help with finding the question.
Okay, next question is, apologies for the disembodied voice, everybody, but I'll just give voice to the chats. Judy has asked, well, I'm sorry, let's go to Marilyn's question first. Are there pathways in the natural burial, the dedicated natural burial section?
Chelsea,
sorry, I was trying to find my unmuting button as usual, awkward delay. So we do have main pathways that have been designated that will be gravel, and those are sort of those curving pathways. In addition to that, and I apologize, it's very hard to see on this rendering, we do have zones that are sort of access ways that extend kind of north toward the stream, so sort of north, more or less north-south on the site. And we're imagining those getting more of a mown treatment. So it's more of a grass pathway, but it would be kind of treated a little bit lower so that it's easier for people to walk and they'll be able to see it. And so they can step off some of these gravel paths and work their way further in along those mown routes.
Great. So now let's take Judy's question. Judy's curious, when will the forested natural burial be available?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. In fact, yesterday I was emailing back and forth with Mary and then another consultant. We have Tim Brooks, who will be presenting on Saturday. The 25 acres we have to develop is a very complex area. Some of it is in the environmental protection zone. Some of it's in the environmental conservation zone. And that all means a lot of basically bureaucratic work to go through with the city of Portland. If we did need to clear some trees, for instance, to make room for burial, we would want to do a light touch, but the city has requirements that either we plant trees elsewhere, which I have quite a bit of room at Riverview to do that, and working with Mary on deciding where we would be planting trees to mitigate any tree removal. And then access is probably the biggest situation with our 25 acres in that forested area. Most likely we would need to construct a bridge because the 25 acres is adjacent to the cemetery proper. However, there is a canyon that needs to be traversed, and it's too steep to take our equipment or for people to, I've tried to walk it myself, and it's a very difficult slope to navigate through the ravine. So I would say it would be a number of years. I can't really say when. I would more than 5 years before we get to that point.
Rachel, we have a follow-up question on this from Leslie, and then we'll get to a series of great questions that Bill has posed. We're starting to see some themes emerge here. Leslie is wondering if it's possible to reserve a spot in the forested area now, but also perhaps you could say with the natural burial meadow for these areas that may come open in the future. Is it possible to reserve spots there now?
So I think the best thing that folks could do is contact us to get on a list that we can keep you updated with where we're at. We do not hold a license for what's called pre-construction sales. The Mortuary Cemetery Board takes that pretty seriously. And I don't have a license for pre-construction sales. And I don't intend to pursue it because it's tricky to navigate. So the best way to keep track with us is to contact us. We'll get you on our mailing list so you can get newsletters and updates on what we're doing. Well, we're very committed to keeping social engagement with all of you. We are shooting for the natural burial section, the meadow that's in front of you, to open next year, if at all possible, unless we get some sort of a regulatory situation thrown at us that we can't control. But right now, Chelsea and I are chugging along and having that date of 2022 for that area. Again, you could have natural burial throughout Riverview Cemetery as it is right now. And unfortunately, I can't give a solid answer on the forested burial, but it is identified with our board of trustees that that's what we want to do with that 25 acres.
Thanks, Rachel. So another wrinkle on this question of advanced planning from Bill. This is the first of 3 questions from Bill. He and his husband purchased plots just southeast of the new area and is wondering, could they switch their purchases to the natural burial section, the dedicated natural burial section?
Yeah, so if you've already pre-planned with us, and let's say it's next year and this section's open, and if you wanted to switch, what we would do is apply what you've paid into what you purchased already, rewrite the contract to record what you're doing, and then you would just pay the difference.
Okay, so now I have a few folks who are curious about what perhaps is sometimes called sequential burial, or the idea of reusing a burial plot. Bill's wondering, does Oregon allow reusing a natural burial plot after a certain number of years? It could be used by someone else. Dawn has asked a variation of that. Can you be buried on top of one another? We'll come back to the question of cost. And we have another commentator who was under the impression that natural burial would be sort of on loan for a number of years and then could be reused by others.
Okay, but I'll address that one about the reuse of graves. It comes up a lot. I actually am very curious about it myself, and I've attended quite a few industry related conferences about it. Really, in the United States, the only place that I know of that you can reuse in what's called an interment right is in New Orleans. But everywhere else in the United States, it's not, the graves cannot be reused, and it's the way the laws are written. We all follow kind of a common law that kind of goes back to Old England. So when you buy an interment right in the United States, you're purchasing a perpetual use of that interment right. So you are purchasing a perpetual lease, if you will, to use that grave. And that's just the way the laws are. Unless there's other cemeteries that would join with me, Riverview wouldn't be able to shoulder that charge ourselves. It would involve a lot of attorneys being hired and basically rewriting law. and it would be a lengthy process. Now, if there was several cemeteries open to joining me in that and going through it, I think it might be worthwhile. But as it stands, the only place in the United States that you can reuse an interment right is in New Orleans.
Thanks, Rachel. So the last question from Bill, back to what we're seeing on the screen. Will the Meadowview Terrace be ADA accessible?
So Bill, the answer to that is yes. So we've been working very closely with the grades. So you can see the easternmost pathway that extends out to the road. From that point, a person could arrive, move north and straight into the Meadowview Terrace. We have made sure that the slopes meet all the ADA requirements so that they aren't even ramps, they're just sloped walks. So that's a very gentle, easy way into the Riverview Terrace. And if we continue with the compacted gravel, that should all be fairly easy, even for folks who might be using wheelchairs and walkers to navigate. There are other portions of the site that are steeper but are barrier free. So those would be a little more challenging, but depending on how adventurous you are, there are other places to get to. But to kind of hone it in on your exact question, yes, there is an ADA accessible route to get to that terrace overlook.
Thanks, Chelsea. Rachel, there are 3 questions thus far asking about price. Don is wondering about the difference in cost of the various methods of burial. And Carol has asked whether natural burials are generally more expensive than traditional. And Mary's wondering the price range for natural burial.
Mm-hmm. Those are all good questions. So at Riverview, our natural burial graves are the same cost as any other grave because we're selling a right to use a part of the cemetery. And so when you look at cemeteries, you have to think in terms of that. You're buying the use of a part of the land. So we have different tiered pricing, just like anywhere else in the real estate market. It's location, 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 and view. So if it's a popular area with a good view, those might be a little bit more expensive. In our less expensive graves are in areas that maybe there's not a view or it's further away from some other amenity. Our graves currently range from about $2,900 up to $6,900 per grave. We do at Riverview have a natural burial surcharge. It's just a few $100s more, but that covers the maintenance cost for us to come in and backfill. But it's certainly, when all said and done, can be cheaper than conventional burial since conventional burial folks are buying those vaults, and those vaults can go for thousands and thousands of dollars. So that's really where the price difference is. With natural burial, you're not doing that. You could be wrapped in a shroud or a wooden casket and not making that investment in using a vault.
Here we have a question from Deborah and Deborah Threadgill suggesting letting veterans know that Willamette National Cemetery also allows natural burial. You would have to state that fact when scheduling with the VA.
I did not know that. Thanks, Deborah. Deborah is a friend of ours in the industry. For those that are on the webinar, she owns Threadgill's funeral home out in the Beaverton area. And she is a big, big proponent of green burial in the area. So thank you, Deborah. I had no idea. Marcus, did you know that? I'll put you on the spot.
That's the first time I had heard about it. So
that's good to know.
Rachel, continuing with the cost questions, is aqua cremation, the water cremation, an extra cost? How does that compare with flame-based cremation cost?
Actually, I'm going to hand that question over to Marcus.
So the difference in in cost, Aqua Cremation is going to be a little bit more. Right now, we are at the infancy of the aqua and alkaline hydrolysis process taking hold. Just like with anything, price kind of is higher at the beginning, and I'm sure it'll stabilize out once there's more machines and things of that nature, and it's still kind of more specialized for the aqua cremation than it is for flame. Everybody's used to what needs to go into it, and it's relatively easy to install it. There's a little bit more that goes into alkaline hydrolysis.
Yeah, the alkaline hydrolysis machines are complicated to run and time consuming. A flame cremation does not take as long as alkaline hydrolysis does. Also, the machines are very, very expensive. They're like 5 times the cost of a flame cremation unit. And like Marcus said, that it's just starting to gain in popularity. I would think about 1/3 of all of our cremations are aqua cremations. So still 2/3 of the clients are choosing flame over aqua cremation. The price difference is not that much. Marcus, what's the?
It's about in between 800 to 1,000.
Yeah, that's what
difference.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more aqua cremation. And there's only one unit in the Portland metropolitan area. That's the other thing to take note. That's a service that we contract out to like a central provider. So they do alkaline hydrolysis for a lot of funeral homes. I'm sure, like Deborah, who is just in the chat, I'm sure she has clients that use that purchase alkaline hydrolysis, and she's going to the same provider as we are.
Rachel, Linda is wondering, she wants a green burial. Her husband wants aqua cremation. Can they share a plot?
Yeah, totally. So you can have cremated remains in the interment right. So your husband could be in the same grave as you. Now, if it's in the natural burial section that we were just looking at in Chelsea's design, the one thing is that your husband's cremated remains would need to be either scattered in the grave with you, or that he's in a biodegradable, that cremated remains are in a biodegradable container in that grave. We wouldn't want metal or ceramic or anything like that.
Another question about what goes into the ground from Rosemary. Does a shroud need to be made of a certain material?
The shroud needs to be made of a biodegradable material. So you want to look at more organic materials like cotton, something that's easily going to break down, not something that's plastic. So just keep that in mind. You could also have something that's woven if you wanted to go with another kind of product other than cotton or silk or something like that.
Great. This might be another question for Marcus. Don is wondering, how are the bones processed after aqua cremation?
So after aqua cremation, the bones are removed from the machine, and then they are placed in another machine to basically dry out. So kind of think of it as like an oven trying to just take all that excess moisture away. And then what you get left is really, really brittle bone, and you can actually touch it and it'll just kind of fall into and on itself. And so from there, if there's anything else you needed, it would still get ran through a processing machine just to make it even more fine before placing it in a bag and in a temporary urn back to the funeral home.
Rachel, I think we've answered all the questions that have
Yeah.
come into the chat.
Yeah. So I did want to point out in the chat, you'll see that we have a brief survey that we'd love it if you would take it for us so we can see how we're doing and improve upon ourselves for any future lunch and learns. And I just wanted to think, I just looked to see how many people were still engaged, and I'm pretty blown away. Thank you so much for staying with us and asking these really great questions. If you ever have any follow-up questions, you feel free to call Riverview and we'll have an employee get back to you with an answer. I wanted to also do a little plug here for our social media where you can follow who we are and what we do. On Facebook, you can find us at Riverview Cemetery Funeral Home. And on Instagram, it's at Riverview Cemetery. And again, feel free to go onto our website and you can sign up for us to contact you about our newsletters and keep you abreast of the changes that are coming as we get closer to the meadow at Riverview opening in 2022. And Anna and Holly have put those links in the chat for you to grab. So if anyone has any more questions, that's all we have for you. Again, I really want to thank you for attending. And I want to thank Chelsea and Mary and Anna and Holly and Marcus. It was great. It was great for our first one. So thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.